Welcome back everybody to another one in my aviation news roundup series, and today we're going to be looking at some of the notable aviation events that took place in the month of January of 2024. Have a few topics I want to go over. Might not be quite as long as previous videos, but a couple of things we'll talk about. So let's jump right into this, and as always, my name is Sean and this is Sean's Aviation. So jumping right into some of the headlines, the big aviation headline for me for the month of January is the fact that Masters of the Air has finally released. Now this is the long-awaited sequel, so to speak, of the Band of Brothers Pacific. Band of Brothers was obviously the Easy Company of the Airborne, dropped into D-Day, following up until the end of World War II, and then the Pacific followed the unit going through the Pacific again from sort of midway through to all the island hopping into the end of the war. Now, Masters of the Air, same people, Spielberg, Tom Hanks, the whole nine yards, started with HBO, was eventually moved to Apple TV, and released last week, actually. Well, for me anyways. Last week was January 26th, I believe, was when the series released on Apple TV. First two episodes dropped. And it is kind of, like I said, the spiritual follow-on to those two previous stories. And it's following the, it's based off the book. I actually have a copy of the book right here. It's based off the Donald Miller. It's based off the Donald Miller book of the same name. Which it's a pretty hefty book, but it follows the history of the 100th Bomb Group, kind of from their arrival in England in '43 through to the end of their tour, the end of the 100th Bomb Group, which was near the end of the war in I believe it was June or April of 1945. So it's based on the book, and I'm happy with it, to be honest. I mean, I'm an aviation guy, I'm an airshow guy, I'm a history guy. So there's a lot of things that are all coming together in this series. And I grew up watching Memphis Belle, and always a huge fan of that movie and everything else. So this is really an interesting series. And I have to caveat that it's not perfect, but no TV show will be. As somebody who's coming from an aviation and a history side of things, the show is written and filmed in a way that somebody who knows very little to nothing about World War II history will be able to sit in on it, learn something, and be entertained. It's not assuming that you are a master in history in order to watch it. But on the flip side, there's also a lot happening in the backgrounds and the details that if you do know things about the history, you can pick up on them, and they're not going to purposely point out every little thing that's happening. So it's very accurate in some respects, but it's also a little basic in others, because it's ensuring people without the knowledge can still go in and enjoy what they're seeing. Now, they did not use any real aircraft for the filming. Everything was done effectively CGI. They have full-size replicas they used for the filming on the ground. They have the sets they use in the soundstage, and then a lot of the aerial shots are all CGI. And the CGI is not bad. I mean, the aerial combat scenes are really good. A lot of the flying looks real, looks right. The takeoffs and landings are pretty janky, to be honest. They fly way too fast on landing and takeoff. They lift off too soon. The approaches are too steep. The climb outs are too steep. You can clearly tell they're coming from an angle of like modern airliner type feels instead of a heavy bomber in World War II. So it's not perfect. You have to take it with a grain of salt. It's there to entertain. It's not there to teach history. As much as it is a history show, it's not a documentary. It's an entertainment. So pinch yourself once in a while. Get off your high horse. Just enjoy it. I said the combat scenes are amazing. It's the realism is there. It doesn't feel like propaganda. it doesn't come across as this, they're not justifying what they did. Anyways, it's worth a watch. I'm happy. I've only seen 2 episodes of, I believe there's 9 total. The next one will be releasing a couple of days from now, and I'm excited to see it. But watch the episodes, give it a shot. It's worth it. I think Apple TV has a 30-day trial. Jump in, watch it, see what you think of the first 2 episodes, and if it's worth. Luckily, I have a 3-month subscription for my new phone I bought a few months back, so I'm just using that to get through it. But give it a shot is what I'm going to say. Don't just write it off. Don't read online reviews and just shrug your shoulders and walk away. It's worth giving it a shot. It's good. I have to say, I'm happy with it. I can look past the few issues and I can enjoy it for what it is. Another bit of aviation news. I haven't actually mentioned it on here before, and that's NASA's Ingenuity helicopter. Now, this was the little helicopter they sent to Mars and have been flying around on Mars. Now, initially, it was only supposed to be, I believe it was, let's see, check my notes. Initial mission plan was to do 5 flights over 30 days as a proof of concept. Can a helicopter fly on Mars? And it worked. And like most probes that NASA has sent to the Red Planet, it defied all expectations. And it ended up doing 72 flights over the course of 3 years. And on one of the flights during January, they lost communication with it. They were able to reestablish the communication with the helicopter. The rover was able to get closer to it, reestablish communication, and the helicopter was basically fine. It had landed on its legs the way it was supposed to, and its initial readbacks were everything's all good. Further study of the data, as well as some imagery from the rover, clearly showed there was some damage to the blades. At some point, either while in the air or on the landing, I haven't heard the details yet, the blades were damaged, and so NASA has officially retired the Ingenuity helicopter. It's a sad day because that was doing some amazing work and really proved that drones of certain types, depending on the atmosphere, can be flown. But you can fly helicopters on Mars. Now you have the ability to have a large. I mean, this drone, I believe, was it was a little. It was large for drone size. It's not the size of your cell phone. We're used to DJIs and stuff. It's a larger unit, but there's also thinner atmosphere. But this paves the way for much larger, more complex drones that can go far and wide and get down into, craters and that kind of stuff and actually explore and look up close with what's happening on the Martian surface. So it's very exciting what that could lead to in the future in terms of exploration and probing, not just on Mars, but on other bodies, not so much planets per se, but some of potentially Jupiter's moons that are very Earth-like or Mars-like, like Europa and stuff like that. There's a lot of chances here for some very interesting exploration. And while it's space news, I feel it's a helicopter. It's close enough to aviation that I feel like I want to talk about it. Moving on, back in the news, I think I've talked about them a few times here, is Flair Airlines. It's Canada's low-cost airline. They were expanding quite quickly through COVID. Then they ran into some issues in terms of government oversight of their ownership structure, and they had to reorganize their ownership. They shed some aircraft in order to get their ownership within proper boundaries and laws. They started to grow again. They were doing okay. Now it's come to light through access to information that the CRA is effectively coming after them for back taxes. Now, this has got to do with the importation of some of the aircraft, some of the 737 MAXs that they were leasing, and there's importation fees. There's taxes that have to be paid when these aircraft are brought into the country. And it's to the tune of $67 million of unpaid back taxes to the federal government. Now, again, this wasn't the CRA making the announcement. It was access to information records that brought this to light. But from that, people were able to figure out that the CRA had filed a court order in order to get permission to seize assets in lieu of payment if Flair didn't pay. So once that broke the media, Flair responded saying, no, we have a payment plan. We're paying this off. We're not in any trouble. But the fact that the CRA has applied for permission to seize assets if required, tells you that this is not a trivial matter. This wasn't just a letter sent to the, being like, hey, don't forget, you owe us money. This is, no, you owe us money. Here's a carrot, but that's the stick if you don't pay. So it's going to be interesting to see, especially with things like Porter expanding. Can Flair keep up their numbers in order to continue bringing in their income at a level required to keep paying vendors and pay salaries and also pay back taxes? So time will tell. Hopefully Flair does not go away. I think it's good to have that kind of competition in the market, but it's things are getting a little shaky for them. Finally, just in the headline section, as of literally this morning, I've seen pictures around the internet, mostly on Facebook, of the RCAF's second A330, 33003. 002 is currently flying in the VIP scheme. 003 will be the second one that we get delivered, part of the Kuwait Airlines purchase, and then there's, I think 004 will be part of that, and then there's still another, four? Yes, there's two more used ones coming, one of which I believe will be 001, and then 4 new builds. So there's still quite a few A330s to be delivered over the next couple of years. But the second one should be arriving in Canada soon. The pictures have surfaced of it flying in Basel, France, and it was back in France for interior work. It had gone to start getting work done. Then it went, I believe, to Malta to get painted. And then pictures had come out of it coming out of the paint hangar, and then it returned to Basel for interior work, and now the pictures are of it flying after the refit of the interior, which means it's very close to being delivered. So we should expect to see that hopefully within a few weeks here in Canada. Again, whether it comes to whether it comes to Ottawa or goes to Trenton is unknown at this point, but we should see it here within the Canadian borders relatively quickly. And if I haven't yet, I'll put the picture up of what it looks like flying. It's in the overall gray scheme, identical to what the current tactical A310s or the CC-150 Polaris looks like. And again, this is a CC-330 Husky is what they've called the A330. So we should be seeing the second one soon. That's exciting. Moving on to events. Again, these are the 4 air shows that I'm planning to attend this year. Michigan. The big news that came out of Michigan recently was a privately owned F5. I've actually seen this once. See, I don't even know if I actually have the pictures of it. I'll have to, I'm just quickly checking my website while I'm talking here. Yes, I do have some quick pictures of it. It was in London in 2018, and then the pilot ended up getting injured, and the aircraft did not fly in the show. And as far as I understand, that is the aircraft that is also supposed to be at Michigan. So that's exciting. Again, getting a chance to see an F5 fly, not a T-38, not a but an actual single seat F5A. It's very, very exciting. I believe it's an ex-Canadian one, to be perfectly honest. I'll have to look that up again. But anyways, if I haven't yet, I'll put the picture up here. I took of it in 2018 in London. So it's going to be at Thunder over Michigan. So that's pretty exciting. And there will be hopefully some more announcements coming out soon. The next London hasn't had any announcements, to be honest. Again, Gatineau hasn't had any announcements. I take that back. There was an announcement. I don't know if I talked about this last time on the last video, but Gatineau hasn't announced it yet, but on his official website, again, I'm going to go, see, I don't have these on my notes yet, so now I have to go through the internet while I'm talking about this to actually make sure I'm not making stuff up. Back on January 12th, Ghost Rider Airshow released a schedule, and on that was the fact that he will be in Gatineau. Now, Ghost Rider Airshow flies a Super Chipmunk, which is a Chipmunk with a higher power engine. I believe he's got a 6-cylinder engine on it. Puts out 200 or 300 horsepower, significantly more than a stock Chipmunk. And he does aerobatics. He's got pyro, he's got LED lights, so there's going to be probably part of the Friday night show, as well as the Saturday and Sunday show. So again, hasn't officially been announced by Gatineau, but it is on Ghost Rider's airshow schedule that they will be in Ottawa, in the Ottawa Gatineau Airshow. So that's exciting, and I've never seen it before. It's a new plane for me. It's a new act for me. I'm always excited to see new acts when they come out. So we talked about Michigan with the F5, London has nothing new, Gatineau has Ghost Rider air shows, at Trenton as well, no real new news out of Trenton. We're still looking at the four acts, the Snowbirds, the Flair Airlines, the CF-18 demo, and the F-16 demo are still the only 4 confirmed acts to be, and the Warplane Heritage, Lancaster, DC-3, and B-25. Those are the confirmed acts for Trenton. I'm waiting for more. Again, we're only about 5 months out from that air show, so they're going to have to start making some announcements soon. So I'm very hopeful that being the RCAF 100, there will be quite a bit of content there, quite a bit of cool planes. So very excited to see where that all goes. So again, as more stuff comes out, first of all, my Facebook page, I'll be posting stuff to Facebook immediately as I see it. So if you want to stay up to date on any of those four shows, hop over to my Facebook page, follow that. All my updates come out immediately over there. And then as well with these news, as well as, basically on these news updates, I'll be talking about those as well. Moving on to incidences, there's been 2 big incidences that happened in the past month that I haven't talked about here before because they just happened. And I'm sure most of you out there have heard of these already. The first one was the Japan Airlines A350 in Tokyo. I don't have the date off the top of my head, but it was early in the month, and the A350 was landing at Tokyo's airport. And as it was landing, there was a Japan Coast Guard Dash 8 on the runway, and the A350 literally flew into the Dash 8 on landing. Amazingly, the A350 stayed together. Nose wheel collapsed, plane went down the runway literally like a fireball off the end of the runway. Everybody was able to get out of the aircraft, which was unbelievably amazing, considering the impact and the fact that that Dash 8 just disappeared into a fireball of jet fuel. As well, the pilot of the Dash 8 survived, which again, when you look at what's left of the wreckage of that, I'm super lucky that he managed to survive. I don't know if I can't say he walked away from it, but he survived. So that will also go a long way to answer some of the questions about what happened to cause this accident. But it's pretty amazing when you look at it. I've been following, the flurry of information came out early on, some of it wrong, some of it right. But from the best I can gather was the Dash 8 had been told to hold short of the runway. The Dash 8 entered the runway. The ground did not notice that the Dash 8 had entered the runway. And as far as we can tell from the videos, the Dash 8 did not have the strobes on. There only would have been the nav lights, which are just a steady light. And that would have been very difficult for both the ground controller, who's in a tower potentially, up to a mile away, and the pilot landing. The flashing strobes, that's what gets your eyes. It catches your eye and you realize something's there. A steady light amongst all the other lights on the airfield, you can't see anything. And that's what the pilot of the A350 stated, was he couldn't tell anything was there until it was too late. And from what it looks like when the A350 landed, the mains were on the ground, the nose was still in the air when it impacted the Dash 8. And you can tell that based off, there was a really good website, one of the news agencies in Japan had done this kind of a almost like an animated story of all of the incidents. And if you look at the top, first of all, if you look at some of the pictures of the 350 damage before it was completely destroyed, on the top, on the front of the nose, you can see effectively a T indent in the nose cone where the vertical and horizontal stabilizers had dented the nose cone of a 350. And you compare the heights of it, if a 350 was flat, the top of that Dash 8 tail would have gone right into the cockpit windows. But it was on the nose cone, which means the nose of the Dash 8 was up. The A350, I should say, was up. So the nose wheel hadn't yet hit the ground when the planes collided, which explains why the wheels got ripped off, because it had all that damage, and then the A350 would have come down onto the top of the Dash 8, and it would have just ripped that nose gear right off that A350. As well, the engines of the A350, on the insides, there's a circumference of the engines. On the inside circumference, there's cuts leading into the cowlings, and those are the wingtips of the Dash 8 as they impacted the engine cowling. So you can kind of start to put together where the different parts of the Dash 8 impacted the 350, and you get a good feel for kind of where the orientation was. And then the big explosion was all of the fuel on the Dash 8 going up in flames, probably as they went, hit the engines and everything else, and it all went up. But the fact that the 350 stayed together, everyone got off, unbelievably amazing. As more, we should be seeing something soon of, you know, a preliminary report, so to speak, of just here's what we know now. You know, the full investigation might take a year or two, especially something as complicated as that. But we should be getting something relatively soon in just terms of a status update, and obviously we'll update here. But it looks, for all intents and purposes, it looks like the Dash 8 should not have been on the runway. The pilot mistakenly entered the runway. Nobody noticed. A350 landed behind and effectively on the Dash 8. So it might bring about some more, I don't want to say policy changes, procedural changes. Again, we've had other instances in the past of a 737 hitting a metro in the US, I believe it was back in the 90s, and that changed. That's where the rule came out that once you enter the runway, your strobes have to be on, and that allows pilots in the air to get that visual cue that something's not right. There shouldn't be flashing lights on a runway. Whether those rules exist in Japan or not, I don't know. If they did, the pilot was at fault. Even worse, if they don't, they might now be put into use. I don't know the ins and outs of Japanese aviation law, but that's why there's going to be a status update at some point. We should get something saying this is what happened and why and how we're going to mitigate this going forward. The other big one, which is a huge can of worms for more than one reason, was Alaska Airlines MAX 9. Without going into too much detail, there's lots of videos out there. Again, I recommend Juan Brown on the Blanco Lirio channel if you really want deep dives into some of these incidents, because he breaks things down very, very well into a lot of minute detail if that's what you want. I'm not going to go into that here. But effectively, the MAX 9 that Alaska uses, the MAX 9 has provisions for an extra emergency exit behind the wings. Depending on the fit out of the aircraft from airline to airline, they can choose to have the door in place or plug the door. And in Alaska's case, the door is plugged. And those door plugs have 4 bolts that hold the door in place so it can't come off the airframe. In this case, the door came off in flight. Nobody was injured, nobody was hurt, plane landed, everything was fine. The investigation is looking like those 4 bolts were not installed. The door plug was not mounted, it was just placed there, and there was nothing stopping it from leaving the aircraft. The big questions come down to why weren't the 4 bolts installed and who didn't put them on? The fuselages are built by Spirit in Kansas City. They are then, or Kansas anyways, they are then shipped by rail to the factory in Washington, in Seattle. And then there you've got Spirit employees who do any QA work or QC work on the fuselages and finish up any minor issues. And then Boeing takes the fuselages and finishes production. Was it Spirit who forgot to do the bolts? Was it Boeing who removed the door, put the door back on, refused to put bolts? And why did a QA or a QC inspection not catch that the bolts weren't there? So there's quite a few holes that have lined up in the cheese to make this happen. And it seems like with a lot of recent Boeing incidences, a lot of these holes are lined up. It's almost like there's somebody in the company who's purposely lining up the holes. I know that's not how it is, but that's how it looks, because it's very, very hard to believe that these many holes have lined up these many times on this many different incidences and airframe types. So Boeing has a lot of soul searching to do. The FAA, I think, has a lot of soul searching to do because they've delegated inspection authority to Boeing on a lot of this stuff, and I don't necessarily think that's a good idea. But anyways, a lot of soul searching on all sides to figure out what the problem is, how they got there, and how they're going to get out of it. So anyways, the MAX 9s were grounded, inspections were mandated. Some of the MAX 9s are now flying again, but both United and Alaska fly the MAX 9, and both have stated that during the inspections they found numerous instances of loose hardware within these door plugs. Didn't specify anything other than that, but loose hardware within the door specs and the door plugs, and a number of times they've had to retorque some of the hardware to spec. Following that, from what I understand, these inspections were also pushed to all of the legacy NG 900s, not just the Maxes. They weren't grounded, but there were instructions to inspect the door plugs. Again, where that ends up going, I don't know. It does not look good for Boeing. And some of these online travel websites actually have a way to filter aircraft type. So if you want to fly from A to B, you can tell, say, Expedia, I want to fly from A to B, but I don't want to fly in a MAX. So only show me flights that aren't MAX, Boeing MAXs. So it's interesting. There's a lot of bad press right now, and it's not looking good. But hopefully at the end of the day, we walk out the far end of this safer than we walked in, and that's the whole point of some of these aviation investigations. It's not necessarily to point blame. It's to ensure that we are safer at the end. So we'll leave it at that. Finally, another update. I've been talking about this off and on for a while. There was that Russian A320 that landed in a field. I believe it was Ural Airlines. Ran out of fuel, landed in a field. Obviously, some of the news out of Russia is pretty quiet, considering what's going on in global politics right now. But there has been some footage showing that aircraft is being scrapped on site. Initially, there was talk of preparing the aircraft to fly out and return to service. That has effectively gone out the window. The aircraft is being scrapped on site. I'll put a picture up here of the latest that I've seen of it. So that is not happening. That more or less brings us to the end of this. I don't have much else this month. Hopefully next month I have quite a bit more on airshow news. I'm excited for airshows this year. But yeah, other than that, as always, you can take a look at my monthly What's on My Desk updates. The February one just came out. Take a look at what's going on with the models. And I've also got a whole bunch more content coming out, both in terms of aviation history as well as some model time lapses and some other stuff coming out. So poke around on the channel if you haven't yet. See what else there is out there. And thank you for watching. We'll see you all next time.